All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai Bashim Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of GMS who rule well, and also honor and salutations to those of you who are of the hopeful elect and are out there teaching the word of sincerity and truth. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the rapture. Um, I had it written down in my notes, and I can't remember exactly why. Oh, excuse me. I can't remember exactly why I had it written down, but um, my initial thought for um, when I read it, when I read in my notes, was that I know there's the word rapture doesn't appear in the scriptures, but the concept of it, right? When you understand what the word means, is talked about in the scriptures, right? Where there's going to be someone, right, or a nation of people, or people, right? I'll say it like that in general terms for right now. That is going to be delivered up into the heavens, right? And there's many scriptures that talk about that idea or that concept. So even though the word rapture doesn't appear in the scriptures, um, the idea is in the scriptures. The scriptures talk about um, a people being delivered up, right? So I this week I kind of went into it and tried to see what the um, what the Christian idea. Salaki. I tried to see what the Christian idea of the rapture was, right? And it kept saying things like, the church, the church, the church. The church is going to be raptured, right? And it begs the question, like, what is the church, and who is the church, right? Because when you put it in general terms like that, it allows you to insert the idea that anybody could be a part of the church, right? Um, and what's interesting is that, at camp we talked to we talked to this guy, a couple of guys. We were getting into it, and we were rolling through the spirit, and these three guys come up, and now that I'm disconnected from the conversation, I remember seeing them speaking before, but I never went into it with them. But the elder was telling me to the side that he had dealt with them one time before. Um, but they came up and said a couple of things. One that we were racist, and he talked about um, his his stance was that he asked the question. He asked about the grafting in, right? That is talked about in Romans the 11th chapter, and of course we we pursued then to lay into his ass, and they really didn't have much of an answer. But the reason is because Christianity, right? Whether you learn it in school, seminary school, or Bible college, or whether you learn it in uh, church, right? Christianity has and I've said this before, but Christianity has a cookie cutter, um, uh, a cookie cutter way of delivering the scriptures, right? And you know, the elder Adami should say it like this, like there's, 66 books in the scriptures, and you could only pull out John 3:16, and it's a great question, right? Because with this cookie cutter idea of the scriptures, um, you leave out a lot of things, and leaving out these things, um, you don't get a full picture of those cookie cutter things that you're talking about. So the cookie cutter things being uh, grafted in, right? Like the guys mentioned, or John 3:16, or Romans 10 and 12 and 13. And when you don't give the full picture of of um, of what the scriptures are saying, then those cookie cutter things can be taken out of context, right? Um, so I wanted to talk, I wanted to talk some of the scriptures that speak to um, rapture, right? But then I want to talk about like who the church is, like who is that? Because the scriptures mention it, right? The church, and then Christians, they always talk about the church, right? But the church is not um, like people like I've had this conversation before with people. They go, "Oh, what church do you go to?" Like if I'm talking to a Christian that doesn't happen to know that I'm a Hebrew Israelite, um, they'll say, "Well, what church do you go to?" Because they hear me, spewing scripture. I always like my life is I have a hard time at this point in my life disconnecting um, what I am and what I go through from the scripture. So I always mention it. So people always, well, what church do you belong to? So I say, well, I don't believe in going to church. And they'll say, well, that's the place where God has His people gather, and again, it allows the idea of anybody can be a part of that thing, right? But the church, when it was being spoken about in the scriptures, is talking about the children of Israel, and the scriptures have always been about the children of Israel, and the children of Israel only, right? So I'm get into some of these scriptures. I have them kind of all over the place up here. So let's go to this one first. Right. So this is so again, as I mentioned, the word rapture, right, doesn't appear um, in the scriptures, but I'm going to show you the word that does and where the word rapture comes from. So this is 1 Thessalonians 4 and 15. It says, "For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which sleep." Right? It says, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of the Most High, and the dead in Hamashiach shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." Right? Now, this sounds a lot like, as far as in regards to being caught up in the air, what happened to the Lord Yahweh Shai, right? What happened to Enoch, right? What happened to Elijah, right? They were all caught up into the sky, right? So let me real quick, let me go to that in Acts. What is it? It's this one right here. So this is Acts 1 and 9. It says, "And when he had spoken these things while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Yahushua, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. Right? So, they saw him being pulled up, in so many words. They saw him being taken up into heaven, right? And I didn't pull the scriptures of Enoch and Elijah up, but they got pulled up in the same way. They got taken up in the same way, right? Which is by the chariots of the Lord, right? And that's what the core of rapture is, being taken up, right? So let me go back to this in Thessalonians so I can show you where they get the word from. And I got this from some video I watched earlier this week. A young man, he sounded young anyway. Went into how this word goes into the Latin and then into it goes, of course, the Greek, then the Latin, and then translated into English. So it's this word caught up, the word that's there for caught up. Where is it? I passed by it. Yeah, here it is, right here. Right. So let me play it. I don't know how it sounds.
Strong's G 726. Harpazo. Harpazo.
Arpazo, right? Which means to seize, carry off by force, to seize on, claim for oneself eagerly, to snatch out or away, right? And that's where the word comes from, that word rapture, right? Matter of fact, I got it pulled up over here. It says rapture, circa 1600, act of carrying off, right? From Middle French rapture, from medieval Latin raptura, right? Which is where that word, which this word raptura is where you get harpazo in the Greek and then raptura into the Latin, right? It says seizure, rape, kidnapping, from Latin raptus, a carrying off, right? Abduction, right? When they say I was abducted by aliens, right? What does that mean? That they were taken up into a spaceship, right? That concept is a scriptural one, right? To be taken up into the heavens by way of a vessel, right? And when you go, matter of fact, let me see if I can find this. They might not let me play it, so this is a disclaimer that this footage is not mine, but I wanted to show you something. Um, let's see. I don't want to watch a whole bunch of different stuff, but here we go.
Ready to beam up, Jim.
Ready to beam up, Jim?
Energizing.
There you go. So he was beamed up into the ship. You see, and Star Trek got that concept from the scriptures, of course. That's where they got that idea from, being taken up into a ship, right? Um, Matter of fact, since I pulled that out, let me go to this one. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. I'll start at 50. This is 1 Corinthians 15 and 50. It says, Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of the Most High, right? Neither doth corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed, right? So Same thing that happened to Elijah, same thing that happened to Enoch, same thing that happened to the Lord Yahweh Shai. As we all know, the Lord Yahweh Shai was in the flesh, right? But he was taken up in the same way that you saw Jim beaming up I forget what the guy's name, Spock, I want to say. But just this, in the same way that he beamed him up, right? As you saw him coming back into the ship, he came in almost like in particles, right? He was changed, and he said, "I'm energizing," right? So we were changing the energy, which is what your spirit, right, will be changed and will be pulled up into those chariots, man. Matter of fact, let me go to what is it? Was it Wisdom of Solomon? I think it is 5. Just go there. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 5. This is Wisdom of Solomon 5:1. It says, "Then shall the righteous man stand in great boldness before the face of such as have afflicted him, and made no account of his labors." Right? Um, it says, "When they see it, they shall be troubled with terrible fear, and shall be amazed at the strangeness of his salvation, so far beyond all that they look for." Right? Why would it be so strange? Right? Because you're going to see a fleet of chariots, the chariots of heaven, the chariots of the Most High, pulling up our people, man, beaming us up, so to say, right? And that's what you're gonna see, man. You know, so that's what the idea of the rapture is. It's simply just being pulled up into the chariot, right? But one would ask, right, why do they have to be pulled up, right? Matter of fact, let me go here. Let me go here. What is that? Revelations 18. It's Revelation 18:4. It says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." Right. So when you ask a Christian what the rapture is, he says the church, right? But really, that church is talking about Israelites, right? That are, because matter of fact, let me do it like this. Let me do it like this. Let's do it like this. Let me see. Boom. Let's see. Let's go here, right? Let me see. I want to look at one that talks to like. See, that was in the church. Let's go. Okay. Let's. It doesn't really matter. They're all gonna say the same thing. So let me just pick one of these. All right. Go to tools and find the word church. Okay. Ecclesia. Right. So this word church, right, comes from the Greek word ecclesia, which means in translation, right, to be called out. You got this word kaleo, right? Let me see. Is this kaleo?
Strong's G 2564. Kaleo.
Yeah.
Kaleo.
Right. Which sounds a lot like call, right? Or call out, right? And it says it to call aloud, utter in a loud voice, to invite, right? To call, i.e., to name or by name, right? To give a name to, right? Wow. It says to receive the name of, receive as a name, to give some name to one, call his name. Wow, I didn't know it said all of that. Right? It says to be called, to bear a name or title, right, among men, to salute one by name, right? So when you understand what was going on in the New Testament, right, which is what we argued with this guy about Sunday, when you understand what was going on, These were, matter of fact, let me do this. Let me show you something. This is I think it's the third chapter. Let me see, it's down a little bit. Bear with me for just a minute here. Okay, I'm gonna start at 12. All right. You can go and get the story of Haman, but I want to make this point real quick. Because Esther 3 and 12, it says, then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, uh, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province, right? And to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, and the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, right? All the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey, right? So let me show you something. I don't know how it's written. Boom, boom. This is Esther 1 and 1. It says, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 107 and 20 provinces, right? So he ruled over 127 provinces, right? But he wrote to all those provinces, right? From India to Ethiopia, right? The 127 provinces, all the Jews needed to be destroyed. So that means in 127 provinces that the Jews dwelt in all of those provinces, right? This is why when you go to, let me see. Oh, shucks. This is Acts 2, and I'll start at 5. It says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven, right? It says, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying, right, so let me go back a little bit. Just verse 6. It says, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language, right? So why were these Jews out of every nation under heaven speaking these other languages? Because throughout history, throughout time, they were in these 127 provinces, and even more than that, right? Because even beyond Ethiopia, you had Israelites at that time. Because after the Babylonian captivity, a lot of Israel moved into what is now known as today as Spain, right? So you had people even further west than Ethiopia, right? So all of these people, right, which is why you get when you read where Paul was from, Tarsus, right? That's Spain, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you have all of these Israelites that were in all of these countries, right? Now, if you were to move, let's say your job took you to China, right? And you had to live in China for an occupation, and this happens quite often in the corporate world, right? Matter of fact, they show you that in that remake of Karate Kid with Will Smith's kid, right? The mother, her job moved her to China, right? So what did they have to do? They had to learn Chinese culture, right? They had to learn the language, right? What those words that were written on the walls meant, right? How to communicate with the people of China, right? So imagine that was just one generation, a mother and a son, right? Imagine year after year after year, generation after generation after generation, uh, living in these other lands and countries, right? Excuse me. Of you're that is going to become your native language. You're with these people, so you're gonna learn those languages. You're gonna learn those customs, right? Right when you go to let me go real quick. I didn't realize how much time I had to take. Ezekiel 5. It's Ezekiel 5:5. It says, "Thus saith the Lord power. This is Jerusalem. I have set it in the midst of the nations and countries that are round about her." Right. So we've been scattered everywhere. Right. So when you hear this word, church, right? Go back to it. When you hear this word church, right, or to call out, or matter of fact, let me before I go to church, right, to call aloud, right, to give a name to, the name that was being given was the name of Israel. These children of Israel that were scattered throughout all the world, all the known world at the time, and even the unknown world, right? When you talk about the Americas, right? They were being called, and they were having a name given to them, the name of Israel being put back on them. That's what the church is. The church is not this place where a bunch of different Edomites Israelites and Ishmaelites and Elamites can come and worship the same power. That has never happened. So the church is Israel, right? Matter of fact, since I said that never happened, let's go to Ezra 4. This is Ezra 4, right? It says, I'll start at the first verse. I'll try to read through it really quickly. This is Ezra 4:1. It says, "Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord power of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, Let us build with you, for we seek your power as ye do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assur, which brought us up hither. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our power." Right? "But we ourselves together will build unto the Lord power of Israel, as King Cyrus the king of Persia hath commanded us." Right? So this is what that calling out was. This is what that church was. Right? So let me make this point right here. And I think I could probably, let me see, what's this? Right, this is just a state church. I had pulled this one up a little while ago. But let me go here, right? Because when you read in the scriptures, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's a narrative that's happening, right? And we can't today um, insert what we want to insert in the narrative. A story's being told. When you go to the movies, right? Some even like for instance, right? When you think of a movie director or a writer or a screenwriter, right? They're writing and they may have uh, uh, like innuendo in the movie, right? Or implications, right? Where it's open to interpretation, right? And the scriptures do that too, right? Where the Lord has made a lot of this a stumbling block, right? And with it being a stumbling block, doesn't take from what's actually being said and what's actually being told when you have the understanding of it, right? And the understanding is not as ambiguous as a movie is, right? Because when you're watching a movie, you don't know what the innuendo is until the end, right? You don't know what the implications are until the end, right? Whereas the Heavenly Father over time has given us understanding of the narrative, right? And when you go to the book of Judges, right, and you follow the narrative of the matter of fact, let me read it right here. I don't have it because they don't do this in Blue Letter, but in my Bible here, when you read the heading before the book of Judges, this is what it says. It says, covering a period from the settlement uh, in Canaan to the establishment of the monarchy under Saul. The book of Judges describes a recurrent pattern among the various Israelite tribes. At first, the people were faithful to the Lord, but they gradually fell into idolatry. Then the Most High punished them through enemies until they repented and called and called again on the Lord for rescue. The Most High then raised up a leader called a judge to resist and overcome their enemies. The 12 judges described in this book served one or more tribes of Israel in this capacity. Among these judges were Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson. The pattern of judges, falling away, punishment, deliverance, is useful in understanding the Most High's way. Christians can observe similar patterns recurring in the history of the Christian church. Why is it a similar pattern? Because it is the same people and the same power. That has been the relationship between the Heavenly Father and Israel. He saves us, right? We're ungrateful. he then puts us back in captivity. Then we call unto him again, and he saves us again. That is the pattern that has been shown in the scriptures. That is the narrative that is being shown in the scriptures, and it's no different when it comes to the quote unquote rapture. Rapture and deliverance and salvation; those words are synonymous. Maybe not in defining them, but in concept, right? Conceptually, those words are synonymous. And when you talk about rapture, when you talk about salvation, that's only talking about the nation of Israel. That's their relationship with the Heavenly Father. They get scattered through nations when they're being disobedient, and then delivered from those nations when they call on the Lord again. It just so happens that in this time, the turnover wasn't as quickly, right? Because when you read in Judges, it's 40 years at times, 60 years, you know, but the turnover in this time was slow. Because what does the scripture say? The Lord is long suffering unto us, right? We had to learn this lesson, and it had to be ingrained deeply into the spirit, man. So let me read this in Judges, and then I'll get out of here. This is Judges 2:1. It says, and the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and have brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of the land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their powers, or let me not say it like that, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. And it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spake these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept. Right? And they called on the name. They called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord. Right? In effect, was there more I wanted to read? Yes. So when you go through the rest of it, it just talks about Joshua. But I want to start here at 11. It says, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam, and they forsook the Lord power of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of spoilers that spoiled them, and he sold them into the hand of their enemies round about, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies, right? And this captivity was no different. This captivity was no different. It just so happened that from the time that um, the Greeks had come into power, which are Edomites, until now, Israel has changed or put off the name of Israel from them, right? And these other captivities, especially, or let me say in particular, like here in Judges, we understood that we were Israel. We understood and we knew that, right? But in these captivities from, I would say, from Alexander to now, we were all kinds of things. We were Moors, right? We were Christians, right? We were Muslims, right? And we took on those heritages and cultures of that time because we didn't want to be associated with the name Jew or Israelite, because from that time, from Alexander on, our people were being heavily persecuted, right? And when you look into like Christianity, early Christianity, especially when Esau took over it, if you didn't call yourself a Christian, or if you didn't, let me say it this way instead, if you didn't put off the name of Jew or Israel from your family, right? You were persecuted, put in jail, or even killed, and more than likely killed, right? So this is why there's been such a confusion this time, who that rapture or who that deliverance is talking about, because they've taken on all these different personalities, if you will. So now everybody feels like they're a part of it, but you're not a part of it. There's no different, and this is why Christians have to say, "Oh, that's the Old Testament." This is why they have to say that, because if they ignore the Old Testament, then their narrative works. But if you apply the narrative of the scriptures in the Old Testament, then you have to say, "Well, damn, you know what? This Bible ain't for me. It is only for them." Right? So that's it, man. That's all I had. That was a lot. I didn't mean to go this long, but it's gratifying to be able to get that thought out. But hopefully it was edifying. I want to give all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Wadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders. Honor and salutation to the elect. And with that, I say shalom.